Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I'm having to narrate across this. Welcome to the first episode of Qwikcilver Spotlight. What this spotlight is all about. We've been getting opinions, perspectives from people, well-wishers, customers, prospects over the past many months to be doing something to get people to engaging with each other, experts from various domains to just to talk about, to share their perspectives about various categories, their areas of expertise, so that each of us can have a knowledge sharing experience. That's what brought about Qwikcilver Spotlight. This is the first episode, and in this context, we are very pleased to be showcasing and having the spotlight on Indonesia. Now, why Indonesia? What is a bunch of technology company individuals and customers of corporates having to do with Indonesia? And in this context is where we're very pleased to have a doyen from the Indonesian market, Mr. Suresh Subramanian, who is the managing director of Kantar, which is one of the most renowned global research organizations. And Suresh has been is currently the managing director, but prior to that, he's got immense experience across anthropological behavior of consumers, of brands, and the interaction between brands and corporates in various touch points of behavior, be it shopping behavior, be it just societal behavior, cultural behavior, and this kind of a context. So it's my privilege, it's our privilege that we have Suresh with us. But more importantly, rather, I wouldn't say more importantly, but added to that, I would also like to take some time, if possible, while Suresh is going to be sharing his insights with us, to also have some time to discuss about his other side. It might be fascinating to also note that Mr. Suresh Subramanian is an accredited ICC umpire, cricket umpire. So it's fantastic that he's a practicing umpire on the cricket pitch. So he's been raising his dreaded finger across Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, in various ICC tournaments. So while he shared these insights, it's my privilege to have this ringside view with Suresh as he takes us through Indonesia and what the market is. All right. So Suresh, welcome you here once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Pratap. Thanks, Qwikcilver, for inviting me, and also starting with Indonesia. So I'm an ambassador of Indonesia today, especially the Indonesian consumer. So it is. So I'll share something that will give you more information about the country, a country that we call the land of plenty. And hopefully it opens up opportunities for many of you who are looking at this country, but also gives you some view on how things are different around other parts of Asia. So let me start by I'll share my screen and walk you through a few slides.
Suresh, I just thought of being dressed for the occasion. When in Indonesia, dress as the Indonesians do. This is the only passport I've got for myself.
Absolutely, and you're more than looking the part, Pratap, as usual, colorful and energetic. And as usual, I'm sober. I'm also batik, but there are versions of batik: the sober version and the Pratap version. So you're wearing the Pratap version, which is great. All right, so welcome to Indonesia. This is obviously there are different lenses to look at a country. Today, I'll spend a bit of time giving you from a digital lens. And again, the work we do at Kantar is understanding consumers. What do they do? And more importantly, why do they do the things they do? So a lot of my lens would be that. And, I'm not much into valuations and other things. And those we'll leave it to other experts. So what's Indonesia? And like we said, Indonesia is a land of plenty. I think it's a land of plenty islands, plenty of resources, and plenty of people. but more importantly, it's a land of plenty of opportunities. And every year there are more opportunities in this country, which is great news for people who want to look at this country to invest in. Yeah. There are 17,000 islands. Again, it depends on whether it's low tide or high tide. I think the number of islands changes by tide. So it's a country of large number of islands. It's all kinds of oceans around it. Out of these, 6,000 are inhabited. So you can understand the geographical complexity in dealing with that. Very large coastline. It stretches almost from on the width-wise, starting from almost near Andaman, going all the way towards the end of Australia. So it's a fairly wide geographical, mass that Indonesia is. There are 3 time zones. Again, shows the width in that sense. It's the 4th largest country in the world in terms of population. It's around 270 million people. Fairly young, half of the population being less than 30 years. I'm obviously an exception. So it's also extremely diverse. A lot of ethnic groups, dialects, but united by one language, which is called Bahasa Indonesia. For those, a lot of the audience is from India. So Bahasa, Bhasha, the word, there's a lot of Sanskrit words in Indonesia. Sometimes I feel there's more Sanskrit words used here than in India, if you look at the names and other things. So a huge market, a young market, a diverse market, which kind of gives you a large overview around it. If you can see, that's the spread, right? To the right-hand side where we have Papua, which is almost, towards the eastern side of Australia, and Aceh, which almost is pretty close to Andaman. So that's the kind of coverage Indonesia has, and you have a lot of islands, some big ones, and some smaller ones. Geographically very complex. But a lot of the population, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but stays in Java. Java is in fact among the smaller of the islands, but a lot of the population, close to 65%, stay in Java. That's where Jakarta is, where I'm sitting in Java. So a lot of the population sits here. There are other big islands. There's Sumatra, which is around 22%, and there's a whole Kalimantan, which is another island. Both these big islands is where the money is made, because that's where you have a lot of coal and other natural resources. Indonesia is top 3 in many natural resources. I think there's coal, there's palm oil, there's nickel, and all kinds of things, right? So there's a lot of natural commodities. A lot of that is mined or grown in Sumatra and Kalimantan. And the money is then spent in Java, where most of the people sit. Again, as you can see from this chart, the population dynamics are changing. Outside Java, there is a lot more growth happening. So Indonesia is truly becoming what we call many Indonesias. It's no longer just Java or Jakarta. It's about, that, and that's why the opportunity in the country and growth, right? So it's also urbanizing fairly rapidly. Today, it's around 55% urban, but it's projected to hit close to 70% by another 10 years. So it's urbanizing quite significantly, which is mainly because of infrastructure development. And there are, infrastructure-wise, it's very well developed, in spite of the challenges of being in a country of islands. Right? So this gives you a sense of geographically the diversity and the opportunity. What I'll spend some time on is to what defines Indonesia, what's the cultural, what makes Indonesia different from even other Asian countries. And why I am talking about that, because that also influences the way they behave in the digital world. So there are two aspects which kind of define Indonesia. The first one is Indonesia is one of the world's most affiliative societies. People like to be with other people. It's about belonging. It's about we rather than me. It's, in fact, there's a person called Hofstede who profiles countries. And in that context, you can see Indonesia is, in that sense, one of the world's most affiliative countries. What does that mean? It means things like people just like to be with somebody else all the time, right? There's hardly any me time. It's always we time, right? Spending time with others. It also means people don't like to stand out too much. So you don't have the weird hairstyles and the punks and the others. I mean, you tend to belong, right? That's another thing. There's another local concept called kepo, which means people want to know what's happening in your lives. It's pretty harmless curiosity. It's where, and because of that, there's a lot of social networking that happens inherently. You also have a lot of interest groups. So I know if Qwikcilver was a big brand, even a small brand here, there might be a Qwikcilver fan society. So people form societies and groups together naturally because they want to hang out together. They want to belong in a group. It's a very Indonesian thing to do. What it also means is people believe other people more than they believe the media or anything else. So it's the power of word of mouth. It's very big in this country, and it's essentially that's what dominates. Even health, for example, now because of COVID, there's accelerated health trend. But even for health, like bicycling has suddenly become a big thing. But you don't see one person cycling on his own. On Sundays, you'll see people forming groups, taking their bikes on their bicycles on their cars, and then going somewhere as a group and hanging out or cycling. And so everything is done as a group. You very rarely see people doing things on their own, right? Because of this, because people want to connect with other people, especially social media adoption in this country has been very fast. So it's almost universal. WhatsApp is the way people communicate, everybody almost. And they were fastest in picking up any social media. Why? Because people like to connect. It's a very inherent thing. People like to kind of be in groups. And if not in the real world, in the online world. So this is a very defining characteristic of the country. And it has a lot of implications. Yeah. The other important element cultural element which influences how digital adoption is Indonesia is a very experimental, indulgent, open society. And if you there's a lot more about living for today than planning for tomorrow. What you also see is historically, Indonesia has been a trading post. It's been a trading post between China and the rest of the world. A lot of traffic has gone through that. In fact, there's a port called Palembang, which was the Buddhist capital of the world for many years. And because Indonesia has always had foreigners passing through their shores as traders, that shapes a lot of the way people react to foreign influence. It also makes them very open, very experimental. So they're first to try things. They love experimenting. Anything new, they'll pick it up. And that's the nature of the country, right? Historically, savings, for example, has been pretty low. Insurance, pretty low. Because it's about living for today more than planning or worrying about tomorrow. Indonesia is also blessed as a country because it's had, I mean, there's a lot of volcanoes and earthquakes, but volcanoes also mean very fertile soil. So Indonesia has never had a famine in its history. And it kind of makes it, it's a land of plenty. So you don't need to worry about saving stuff for tomorrow. There's always plenty around. And that shapes also the way people behave and buy and even adopt digital things. So a lot of immediate gratification, experimental, open. So these are two things that have culturally shaped many things, but more importantly, how Indonesians have adopted to digital behavior, how quickly they've picked up digital stuff, right? So based on that, if you look at digital Indonesia today, I would argue it's very developed from a digital point of view. And let's go through some data on that. So if you take internet penetration and the percentage of people in the population who have internet access, that's around 77%. For a country that's so geographically complex, hitting 70% penetration, even in remote islands, as you can see on this chart, tells us that, both the country, government and the others have done really well in building internet infrastructure, right? So in fact, if you take the 13 to 34-year age group, everybody is online. And this is across the country of 270 million. So you can imagine how widespread and how almost day-to-day internet has become. Internet is part of everyone's lives. Right? And it's true in many countries, but 77% in a country of this nature is a fairly, it's well above averages of other countries with this type of framework. The only places where the internet drops is age. So it's the older people who are taking a bit of time to adopt to internet. Hopefully people like us will then increase that 52% over time. And that's, so almost universal internet access in the country, and the internet, it's part of every day. Yep. What does that mean? It also means, okay, so the other aspects of internet is almost 89% of internet access is through mobile phones. It's not through desktops or tablets or other things. That has significant implications in the way, even things like UX, right? How you design for the country, so you've got to be mobile first in anything you do on internet in Indonesia, right? A lot of it is also through cellular data. Wi-Fi is not that common because broadband at home is not that big. It's still patchy. That's only around 24%. So a lot of internet is through cellular, 3G, 4G, and through mobile phones. And that's really important for anybody who's looking at the country digitally to keep in mind, because you've got to design to be mobile first. Let's look at a few other behaviors. What you'll see is, again, I'm referencing different data sources here. So what you'll see is, the big social media platforms like YouTube, WhatsApp, Insta, Facebook, almost everybody uses it, right? So Twitter is fairly big as well. So it's a country where it's very easy to get people to try new platforms. Anything that's got to do with social networking, connecting people, communicating with others, naturally gets picked up very easily, right? And it's almost universal. It's pretty large. What it also means is there is a platform confusion, right? So after a point, if you have a lot of apps on your phone, it creates confusion. So right now, the problem is about consolidation. How do you get them to use more of one rather than, split their time across so much and create more confusion in people's lives? We say that the consumer today is more confused than they've ever been because there's just too much choice. And Indonesia, because they adopt things fast, they have kind of inflicted that confusion on themselves by adding too many things and having too many apps, etc. But again, the larger point is it's almost all communication happens through WhatsApp. It's also a very texting country. When I mean texting, people don't call as much on WhatsApp. People don't leave voice messages on WhatsApp as happens in India, for example. Here, it's a text country, not a talk country as much. So here are which mobile app penetration data. So if you look at it, just look at almost chat apps, 97%, social networking, 96%, music apps, game apps, all of them well above 60 odd percent. Shopping, that's grown a lot, and that's 78%. I think the only apps which are slightly slower to pick up are banking apps or health apps, and interestingly, dating apps. So if you meet in person enough, you don't need Tinder, I guess. So that's the only app which hasn't picked up that much. But otherwise, you're seeing it just shows that how quickly and how easily people pick up digital apps and technologies, right? So yeah. The other interesting part is the role digital has played in financial inclusion. Typically, like I said earlier, it's not a big saving country. So in fact, until 2-3 years back, savings accounts, only 25-30% of people had savings accounts. Today, because of digital wallet, especially things like GoPay, OVO, ShopeePay, they are kind of local digital wallets. Because of that, financial inclusion has now gone up to 50%. So you can just look at it, a mobile payment service, it's around 30 odd percent. Credit card, which has been here for ages, it's only 2%. Right? So it just tells you how digital has disrupted the financial space in this country. And it also tells you how people can learn quickly new things, like 42% of them do your Paytm equivalent or whatever, scan QR codes for payment. So people pick up technology really quick, and technology helps people change behaviors. It's very evident in this, right? Obviously, there is room to grow, but online rides, like Indonesia has Gojek, one of our unicorns, there's Grab. So again, this is at 20% overall nationally. But that's because Gojek is not present everywhere. The moment they expand, that can only grow, right? The same with food delivery, so which is around 30%. Given that a lot of Indonesia eats out a lot, I think this number will grow even further. Typically people eat only one meal at home, right? The second meal is outside, or the third meal is outside. It's the nature of that country. So the point I'm making is technology is beyond just entertainment and chatting. It is making a difference in people's lives, and people are adopting and picking that up quickly. E-commerce, it's obviously, it was growing. It's kind of grown faster through COVID. You'd see, again, fairly almost everybody, 90% has searched online for the product. Almost 87% have visited an online, e-commerce shop. Almost 87% have purchased a product online. Admittedly, yes, this is urban, but given Indonesia's population, that's a fairly big number. Yes, so it's very easy for people to adopt technology, and they use technology and digital pretty commonly in their lives. The challenge now is how can I sell more rather than educating people on e-commerce. So again, another data point to show that whatever the digital type of behavior, Indonesia has already picked it up. And it's I can't think of many digital areas where it is still small. Indonesia picks up things pretty quickly and it's already big in many areas. Even consumer goods, and this is about your groceries. Even that grocery, if you see the e-commerce penetration of buying groceries through online, that's continued to grow, and COVID obviously helped double that from 11% almost pre-COVID. It's jumped to 20% today. Right, so COVID has accelerated some of these trends, but they were growing anyway. Also, if you look at as a media, there are mainly only two types of media people consume. TV, which everybody watches quite a lot still, and there's internet. Radio, newspaper, radio is still there in some pockets, but newspaper magazines are pretty quickly dying out. Indonesia is a very visual medium. It's not a very read type country. So, internet and TV are the main sources of entertainment and media as well. So where does that leave us, right? So I just kind of leave you with some thoughts. There's the Gartner's hype cycle, which typically talks about technology adoption. What we've seen is Indonesia historically has pretty fast adoption. And in fact, on many categories, Indonesia is almost on that slope of enlightenment rather than, trough of disillusionment. So it's been through the hype because, as you saw earlier, almost every type of digital activity penetrations are pretty big. Number of people using it are pretty big. So today it's almost about, productivity and profitability. That needs to be the next focus of people in the digital world. Penetrations or getting people to download and start using an app is pretty easy. It's already happened quite a lot across. The challenge now is about how do you make it profitable? So, including, the big ones like Gojek and the e-commerce, the game is not a user growth alone. It is about profitable growth. And that becomes the next challenge as we kind of come towards the right-hand side of the Gartner cycle. So that's some things I wanted to share with you today to give you an overview. Now I'll hand you back to Pratap and maybe we'll start taking some questions, etc.
Thank you, Suresh. This was pretty quick 20 minutes into 1.5 million years of Indonesian history. So 20 minutes really helped us save up on 1.5 million years of human existence on that in that land. I mean, not exaggerating for effect is what I just gathered that Indonesia has had what life lasting even before the humans came about, as even before what the human being, incidentally, or the Java man. Java man wasn't human. He wasn't Homo sapiens. He was what Pithecanthropus erectus was the Java man 1.5 million years ago. So that part of planet Earth was in existence all along. And as you said, now it's the 4th most populated country in the world. And I think the planet Earth and human existence requires for lands like Indonesia and lands like India to thrive. And as you pointed out, there's tremendous opportunity and aplenty there. And the natural resources of its being on the tropical belt is also aided. You did allude also to the fact that it's been a trading hub and Sanskrit being there. And so that's the sheer magic and beauty of that land, where there's been Sanskrit for more than 1,000 years of Indonesia. And I think Indonesia then, you mentioned about Palembang. I think Srivijaya was what Indonesia was called, or at the Sumatra side where the kingdoms were was based there, and there was a lot of trading happening out of Srivijaya, which then expanded into these lands. So I'd like to get a perspective also on, one is about, you mentioned about digital versus on gender, how exactly is the labor population, labor force accepting woman, male, and that kind of behavior as well. Suresh, if you could just elicit.
Yeah, so usually that's the third difference that Indonesia has, which I didn't pick it up. Thanks for bringing it up. But even on Hofstede, how we profile cultures, there's a dimension called masculinity. And on that dimension, Indonesia is less masculine than China and India, which means it is more feminine. And there are different interpretations of that. But the implication is Indonesia, in effect, is run by women in households, right? In fact, even in women in corporate world, and the finance minister is a woman, and the external affairs. And so but inherently, there's the workforce, 55% of women work. And that in Asia is a fairly big number if you compare with other Asian. This is organized work. If you add unorganized work, that number will only go up. So it's a very women-first country. Even not only, it's also culturally, the role of women in households and what they do, they are a lot more important than us men in this country.
Yes, it's quite enlightening, so to speak, I guess, compared to the rest of, let's say, emerging markets where that could also be something which has got to be improved upon. You're saying Indonesia as a country has been having that culturally and societally as well over time. So that's quite interesting. And
also, I think what typically, there are myths about religion. So Indonesia is the world's largest Muslim country, but it's a secular constitution, and it's not in that sense. And again, it's a beautiful place where you see a difference between religion and culture. So, for example, you have a lot of names which are Devi, right? Devi is the most common Indonesian name, women name. Again, very Sanskrit, but and yet their religion is Muslim. So there's a big difference between the cultural influence and the religious influence.
That's amazing. I mean, this is and it's not a small population. We're talking of 270 million, which is, I mean, in our context, we talk of course of 27 crores of human beings living in this kind of harmony, homogeneously, in spite of the fact that you're saying there's so many dialects and so many ethnic races, so to speak. And what is the unifying factor here, Suresh? Is it like in India, there is cricket? Okay, you're a Grand umpire, so I don't want to trend it there. But what is the unifier there? Is it
I think there's a lot of work that happened around unifying this diverse country, and the first unifier is the language. So the language Bahasa Indonesia is a very new language. It's a language that was almost, because each of the provinces, etc., had their own language. But today, there's one language that everyone speaks across the archipelago. It's called Bahasa Indonesia. It's a very new language, and it's a mix of different languages, and if you see that language. So I think that language was created as a unifier. Also, when the country was set up, the country's slogan is unity in diversity. In fact, it's Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. It's a Sanskrit slogan, which basically that the country's slogan is unity in diversity. So it's been something that has been consciously, encouraged by different governments over time. And that's kind of the unifier. The real unifier is food, or the love for food.
Food is a unifier. So, but I'm sure there would be different palettes there too, and vegetarian, non-vegetarian, what is passe, what's not passe. Interesting.
There's no vegetarian. That's the bit I struggle with. That's the only bit I struggle with. But otherwise, it's it's there. Yes, there is diverse cuisines, but people, you don't have one cuisine. Everybody tries different things. That's the part around food. And any conversation that you have within 2 minutes, it'll move towards some food or some restaurant. So I guess
Okay.
that makes it uniform.
Yeah. And interesting is, has any change happened post-pandemic, post-lockdown? How badly were consumers impacted, corporates impacted, brands impacted? Did brands have to take on any action to kind of address the impact in consumer behavior because of the sheer pandemic onslaught which happened across the archipelago?
I think there's no easy answer to that. I think in fact, I keep doing a webinar called How New is the New Normal? To me, I think 85% of things haven't changed. COVID hasn't created that type of change. Some things have changed. Mainly, I think what's changed, which we are picking up now, talking about, is just a larger health consciousness in this country. That's changed. There were things like digital and all of that were anyway happening, that's happened. There were also things that picked up but have now reduced, like, for example, EdTech. EdTech boomed, but suddenly it's dropped off. It's because it only boomed because you were forced to use that, like Zoom classes and all that. The moment you leave your homes, those things don't remain important. But during the pandemic, I think the biggest difference that happened was if you stay more at home, then you end up buying or eating more or drinking some things more. So there were some categories that really benefited from this, like noodles, for example, or snacking or things. There were other things like makeup, which you didn't need if you were not leaving your home, that suffered during the pandemic. But once mobility came back, I think things have gone back to that normal. So I think the lasting impact of COVID has been only one thing, which is people are now starting to think a little bit more about tomorrow, what we call long-term orientation. It's no longer about just have fun, right? So that's the only lasting cultural or social kind of change.
Has the government also been driving digital adoption and technology adoption, or is it happening in spite of that?
No, the government has I think the government has played a big role in many things. The one, and in fact, for a change, government has been a catalyst in many things, I think, especially the digital infrastructure. Otherwise, imagine a country of, this geographical, so many islands and other places, even to have like an internet backbone, and they've invested in a lot of that. So even if you go to the remotest part of the country, you'll find internet. So government has definitely incentivized that. And its government's focus has been around infrastructure. They have now created a ministry of what they call the digital and creative economy. There's a ministry for that, which basically works on developing the digital economy. And also, there's a lot of local entrepreneurism. I think quite a few local bred unicorns. And I think Gojek's a great example of something, I think, world first in many ways with what they did. And there are quite a few examples like that. So yeah, the government's done stuff, but I think inherently people are entrepreneurial as well, which is
fundamentally entrepreneurial. And there is a tremendous amount of, let's say, the demographic dividend is also something which is at 50% of the population is below 30 years. Correct. Of what your deck said. And is that a significant amount? Is that also driven into IT technology talent? There was a question which came up also from somebody here, that technology talent and how is that training and coaching, and are they actually, is the system of education taking care of what the corporates and in the technology space require? How is that funnel taking place?
I think there is a significant talent shortage. So I don't think it is, maybe that's the difference from India. I think India talent has driven, digital talent drove a lot of what happened in India. What driven here is entrepreneurism. So in fact, Gojek has a large tech team that sits in India, for example. So I think there is a genuine, I don't think either the government or others have done enough around tech talent development, although they're starting to do things, but it's not, there's still a big room for growth in that area. So it's still untapped. From a talent, there's a huge talent shortage.
So from a consumer side, you mentioned, okay, there's a tremendous adoption of digitization. Consumers are comfortable with internet here because it's not expensive. The government has aided that. So there's a lot of mirroring of how a large subcontinental India has kind of evolved, and the Indonesian consumer has also evolved. So there could be some kind of synergy in the way the two markets have actually scaled up over time over the last decade or so. And with the opportunities available as well, would you be able to find a correlation between the two markets?
I think to some extent, but I think the paths have been different, maybe linked to your previous question. I think what has driven, there are two things here. People just, even before digital, etc. For example, ATMs were much bigger, more widespread here, much before they even became a big thing in India, for example. Right? So they've generally been more open and faster with technology in a widespread manner. So I'm not talking about just Jakarta, because then you can compare Jakarta with Bombay and that's similar. But as you go through the small towns and rural, they just pick up things much faster here. And so the route for growth, government didn't have to do much. I think people just pick things up faster. Not only, and also because it's a country that's had so many influences in the past, they just they're just waiting for new things, right? So they pick that up inherently faster. So I don't think government triggered the adoption. What government has just done is made sure there is internet available in that sense. Whereas, and also driven by almost like what we call a micro-entrepreneurial. Everybody is a micro-entrepreneur. Not, your dream is not to be the next Ambani here, but your dream is to maybe start your own shop, right? So those two have driven it. What's held it back is lack of tech talent. That's where I think there's a divergence between India and Indo. So I think the results are similar, but the routes are slightly different, is my
Okay,
feeling.
yeah. And so that's very insightful to say that, okay, I would say in spite of the technology, let's say talent scarcity, the adoption, because of the sheer inherent nature of the Indonesian consumer to adopt technology and adopt change, that's kind of driven a significant amount of each of these metrics which have taken place. We've also seen that in our case, when we enter the Indonesian market, there's been larger adoption by now over the past 3-4 years. More than 100 plus brands in the Indonesian market have adopted digitized technology to enable engagements with their consumers, leveraging our platform. So across large conglomerate groups, having each of them representing many brands. So touch point across the hinterlands of Indonesia has taken place across consumption segments, be it F&B, or be it electronics, or be it fashion forward, large organized retail, or be it grocery retail, that's taken place, including, of course, the brands like the large players like a Lazada or a Grab, including a MAP, the Mitra Adi Perkasa, which has actually scaled up their digital presence, leveraging platforms like ours and other players in the market. And so I think I'll just check off the interesting question which would come about. So there was a question which says, considering the low credit card acceptance and penetration in Indonesia, do we see a potential market for people looking forward to adopt at a faster pace? As I said, the mobile payments itself has taken off in spite of credit card adoption being low. Again, a lot, I guess that mirrors developing markets and emerging markets where mobile adoption, the first way consumers are getting exposed to the internet is via the mobile rather than, as you said, desktops, which the Western world has probably had, or the credit card which the Western world has had. That's not how this part of the world has operated or seen adoption.
Yeah, so it is, and I think it's just that speed of use of mobile wallet and QR codes and all. If there's a demand, I think there is a large demand, and people have picked it up already. And again, all of this, the interesting thing is it happening in the small towns, rural areas? The moment then it happens, then there is scalability, and that we are already seeing, right? So if it was restricted to the top 5 cities, etc., then it's a different cycle. But here, I think what we are seeing is even mobile wallets, etc., have become now the payment uh, platforms across the country. It's not limited to big cities.
So the youngsters are moving into their phase of life via mobile payment mode rather than say cash. It's not a cash economy as it was probably a few decades ago. I mean, since when has Indonesia moved out of the cash economy? Because India still has a cash, while digital adoption is significantly scaled. We are having this kind of a dichotomy where cash also exists.
I think Indonesia is maybe it's slightly. It depends on what you use cash for, right? So I think it's maybe you're still using cash for bigger ticket purchase. Like if I'm buying big groceries, then I'm using cash. But a lot of in a daily life, say once a day, people are eating out or buying some drinks outside or whatever. A lot of that's being done through mobile now, through QR code. And also because these mobile wallets are giving promotions. So it encourages people to use those more. So if I buy more often, then I get whatever, maybe I get some Qwikcilver points, or I get some rewards, which I can kind of, which is also helping shift towards this. So in fact, what we are seeing is digital payment is becoming more the default mode across different things compared to cash or even bank transfers.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, on a lighter note, it was felt very rich for me to spend a million Indonesian rupees to buy a cup of coffee. And I felt very very rich. And I told the person keep the change, which was a few thousand rupees. So,
yes, I'm a multi-billionaire, but it doesn't mean much.
Okay. Yeah, and so that's what we have going here. So I would like to have a quick fire with would you like to now, in the midst of your corporate career, I just want to understand in the next few minutes on what is this umpire stint all about? How has it helped you manage as a CEO of one of the largest research organizations of the world and being an accredited ICC umpire? So how does that help you in your corporate life or vice versa?
I think it doesn't help my boss, but it helps me just to keep the balance. I think it's stresses of one can get de-stressed in another. So I guess that's the way I try and balance that. I also play cricket, and cricket's just a big passion. I play and I do other things with cricket. So umpiring just happened, and because both my roles are about decision making, I assume, except one is the cricket part is more consequential decision making. So it's more at immediate decision making, whereas the corporate part, I can take my time around decision making. But yeah, principally the similarities I see is around decision making.
But how easy is it? I mean,
I don't do as much. I don't do as much as I do a couple of tournaments from ICC tournaments a year, so I can't do more than that. Even all my holidays or leave goes into umpiring, and my family will kill me if I do more. But on weekends I do some stuff here. We have a cricket league which we've set up. In fact, I was really proud because 2 weeks back, it's the first time Indonesian cricket team has made it to the World Cup. Our under-19 women's have made it to the under-19 World Cup in South Africa next year.
Wow!
And we've been working on developing cricket here for many years, and it felt really good when 3-4 weeks back, I think the girls made it to the World Cup. So yeah, so
That's
it's
fantastic. So will we see the day when the Indonesian cricket team is going to beat the Indian cricket team at last in the finals?
that's a big dream. I think here they don't even get to watch cricket, so they learn cricket by YouTube because there's no channel that telecasts cricket here. So yeah, it's small steps, I guess. And the
Okay,
women, again,
you,
the
you can
women's
return the
teams
favor
are
that
doing much
we
better.
gave to you. Our Indian badminton team beat the Indonesian
Correct.
badminton team 2 months ago in the Thomas Cup finals. First time ever, right? The
Yes,
Indian team has never
yes,
ever entered the finals, and Indonesia was what,
yeah,
14 times Thomas Cup winners. They are the
yeah,
erstwhile West Indies of cricket. Indonesia has been all
yeah,
along in badminton, and India's never done
yes,
that. We've
yes,
had anecdotally a Prakash Padukone or a Syed Modi or somebody coming in, or a Pullela Gopichand or one individual star like a PV Sindhu, but as a team beating Indonesia 2 months ago at the Thomas Cup is fantastic. So you could return the favor, and Indonesia beat them. We wouldn't
I
like it.
hope so. Yes.
We wouldn't like it.
No, that's when there'll be I don't know what they call it in England. There's a test. It's like will my Indian part of me be more proud or the Indonesian part of me be more proud? I think that's the bit. But again, it's interesting that even nowadays in badminton, Indonesia's strength is more in the doubles than the singles. Again, it talks about that affiliative part of Indonesia.
Okay. And on the umpiring stint, what about the attention span required? How easy is it
Oh yeah,
as a
that's
human?
the tough
They
part.
stand for a day. As an audience, it's very.
Yeah,
I'm very used to cribbing with a bad umpiring decision, but I'm looking at now you as an umpire standing from. I'm presuming it's even if it's a 1 day match, which a
yeah,
20 over match or a 40 over match, with standing from a 9 a.m. to a 5 p.m. And that I'm presuming they
yeah,
could be third umpire still, but still not everything might be recorded with a Duckworth-Lewis
yeah.
formula or a third umpire decision, which could be possible. So those kinds of, it requires immense concentration power on the focus,
It
isn't
does.
it?
It does. I think the main challenge is not the physical one; it's the mental one. It's about focusing every ball. So we do a lot of training around what we call switch on, switch off techniques. In fact, we get trained around. So it's really important to switch off because if you can't stay switched on for so long. So we practice a lot about between balls. How do we switch off? And there's a lot of training that I didn't realize umpiring was that complex until I got into it. It's a very there's a lot of training we do around that, about mainly around concentration and about making sure that you're switching off as much as you're switching on. So I think that's the toughest bit around umpiring.
Oh, that's fabulous. Are you saying between balls you switch on and switch off, is it? Oh, that's
That's
fascinating.
because that's the technique. In fact, we use NLP techniques and stuff. Each one has their own. There are routines. So we have to get into a routine of every ball. How do you, the moment the ball is dead, how do you switch off?
So,
Because if
so do you
mentally you can't just stay switched on, it's difficult.
so do you have any idiosyncrasy? Like, do you jump or hop on your feet while to
I,
stay alive or stay awake?
I think just walking, my walk itself is a idiosyncrasy. But no, I do like I press my like I have a switch on mechanism where I kind of press my finger to get switched on, for example. So that's it's an NLP technique as they call it, to just to switch on. So there are a few techniques like that, and there's a lot of things that you may not see around how you communicate with your other partners. So there's a lot of emphasis on team game. So in fact, because that will also help you stay concentrating and stuff like that. So it's a very mentally pretty tough. I find actually after tournaments, I need time to recover more than during work and other stuff.
So that is, which has been your most exciting corporate moment and an exciting cricketing moment as an umpire on the field, Suresh? Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think the corporate moment is when we did a large study for the president of Indonesia about building brand Indonesia. It was directly working with the president of the country and his office, and he tweeted our work, and stuff. I think to me that's the moment that I feel proud about or felt good about. I think umpiring moments there have been, a few. I mean, like I did a fairly uh, a tournament in Australia, which was around. It's called the Australian Country Cricket Championships, which is like the second, after. So I was doing that tournament, and that's a pretty high level tournament, and that tournament had, but more importantly, there have been tough tournaments. Typically, there have been 2 or 3 where it's gone down to the last ball. It was, and the different, like just 3 weeks back, I was doing a tournament, which is a World Cup qualifier. And I think a team needed 3 runs to win off the last over. And the difference is very big, because if you win that game, then you get to the World Cup, and then there's a huge difference in money and funding and all of that. So all of that plays in your mind, and just to get through those kind of moments, those are usually, it's not a tournament as much as some matches which you.
So are you saying even as an umpire, you feel the pressure which the batsman or the bowler is feeling? Because you know the implications of what your decision could make.
You can't shut that out. And I mean, good umpires can, but I'm still developing umpires. So it's just that you can't shut yourself off from that.
Yeah, you've been quite humble about. Are you the most qualified umpire in ICC history, probably as a CEO of an organization, also as an ICC accredited umpire? Or
I don't know if they see it that way. I'm sure there are people who are, mine. To me, umpiring is still a hobby. For many people, the umpiring is a profession, which for me, it's a hobby still. So.
Yeah, or I guess there's one player come captain come umpire who went on. Venkat Raghavan went on, was a player, he was a captain, and he was the umpire as well while in India. Dharmasena was umpiring yesterday in Sri Lanka Pakistan match as a former
quite
player.
Quite a few of the umpires today are ex-players of some kind.
Yeah,
they've either done one. I think that seems to be a route now.
All right. Okay. There was one question about, back to something where, Indonesia, you mentioned about the sheer richness of flora and fauna, which Indonesia is probably gifted with.
Yeah.
What about, are there measures being taken towards sustainability, green tech, environmental friendly technology? Are the organizations, is the government doing anything? Are startups being encouraged in that space? Have you got any visibility to that as an organization?
So I think, obviously sustainability is a big thing. And also Indonesia has a fairly large rainforest, which is under threat, especially from, growing palm oil plantations and even in some cases threat to orangutans and other things. So there's always this fight between commercial and development and environment. Obviously, there are commitments being done by the government around it, and I think work is happening. Can there be more of it? Definitely there is. At the corporate level, there's a fair bit. In fact, we ourselves just finished a foundational study around sustainability and what Indonesians want on sustainability. And what are the core sustainability issues and what people should focus on. We just finished a study, I think the first of its kind here, about what do the people want, and also what are they willing to sacrifice to make it happen. I think it's not about somebody pushing you. It has to come from the consumer. And at the moment in Indonesia, the desire is there. The action, still there's a lot of room for it. And like plastic is a huge problem in Indonesia. I think it is the largest problem. And there are some cities, like in Bali, plastic is kind of banned in, at least single use. So there are some things, but if you ask me honestly, there's a lot more that can be done in that area. It's the job of companies to make sustainability more, possible. Like if I, as a consumer, want to give up plastic, how will you help me do that? Without asking me to pay like 3 times for a different type of pack. It's those kind of battles. So it's called value action gap. that's the technical term for it, where there's a lot of desire, but the action is low. I think the gap is still pretty big. It's still work in progress, is what I would say.
Okay. And how's the traffic in Jakarta this week?
Traffic in Jakarta is, I think I like to call Jakarta, as a parking lot. Yes, it's not, the roads are parking lot because things don't move. So you have to just be careful about, when you go, how you go. Yeah, it is a nightmare.
No,
It's getting better. I think some parts of it are getting better because there's a metro now, and
yeah, I'm speaking from Bangalore, and we sure are getting there. We'll look to match you soon. Okay, and you're also looking at having a new capital, so to speak, with Jakarta being shifted to.
Yeah, again, I think that's part of driving growth beyond Java. I think that's the kind of.
It's outside of the Java island itself, is it the new capital?
Oh yeah, it's in Kalimantan, which is like it's a completely new city. They're building a new city almost in a jungle virtually, which is not good for deforestation. But they're looking at it about building for two things: reducing the pressure on Jakarta, so the government offices can move there, and also it's about building economy beyond Java. I think that's the thinking behind this. It's a big project. So in Indonesia, until it happens, you'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, like people who are not knowledgeable very much about India ask, whether I have asked, do you go to office on an elephant? So do you go to office on a dragon, on a Komodo dragon?
Yes. Yeah. Yes,
Right.
I wish they can call the car that, yes. But it feels that slow because of the traffic. Yeah.
All right, okay. Yeah, I guess, would you like to, I would like to thank you, Suresh, very much. I think we've been able to almost stick to the time, just about 10 minutes of an overrun. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate the time taken for this, and we've crept into your lunch time, I guess. So for a good Friday, for a good woohoo Friday, so to speak, that we've had, and so this has been quite insightful as for having Indonesia on the spotlight with you, and wish you all the very best on this fantastic career being chalked out as a corporate honcho and as a cricketing umpire, and continue raising the dreaded finger and keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pratap, and thank you for giving Indonesia the spotlight. And it's been a great time as always chatting with you. And keep up the woohoo-ness.
Yeah, Sai. So thank you very much to all the audience. I hope you've enjoyed this, and look forward to interacting better with you more. Appreciate. Have a very good weekend ahead.